on this journey to coming here yesterday, I exhibited reproductions of the stations at the St. Paul School in Concord. And it's a daunting place. Enormous chapel designed by Vaughan, designer of the Washington Cathedral. I had to get up in a big old pulpit and before 650 high schoolers. And let me tell you, they move like a herd. They tore into the space. And they sat in these old wooden pews, and then when it was over, off they went again. And there was so much passion and youthful energy. And it was good to be reminded of that in that space with such a history. And seeing all of them, it was about hope. Hope for the life going on and moving on. That's what this is all about. And in that magnificent chapel, there is a sculpture by Daniel Chester, French, called Memorial to War, that was commissioned after the First World War to honor the 41 former students at St. Paul who died in the First World War. And it's a monumental angel holding up a dead young man, soldier, in her arms. And French paraphrased, I'll paraphrase French's words this way, and he said, this angel, who I don't like to think of as the angel of death, is taking this young man to a better place. And when I looked around that chapel and I saw those young faces and all the joyful design of the chapel and the glass and the passion to life, I thought, yes, this is transcendent. And that's what the stations bring us to the resurrection. When I discussed doing the stations with Orbis Books, and my friend now, Sue Perry, who just retired as editor, I told her I was ready to paint the stations, and she said, we haven't published a book on the stations in a while, and we'd like to pair the stations with Joan, and can you have them ready in a year? And that's very hard to do. 15 paintings in 12 months. Really hard. Because where I live in the Northeast Kingdom, it's very dark and very isolated and very cold. And I have a lot of anniversaries of loss in the winter, compounding my heart and soul hurting a lot. But I said yes. And she said, and by the way, we'd like to include the resurrection. And you know, as artists, we say, yes, yeah, I can do that. Yep. And boy, I'll tell you, in February and March, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I want to go for a drive in South Carolina. I have to get out of here. But I couldn't do it. I had to stay with it. That was the best thing for me. They weren't done in order, but they did end on the resurrection. And I was so grateful to Sue for asking me to do that, because I couldn't wait to paint it, because I had my own resurrection coming, my own joy in understanding. I came to understand more about the path I was on and why I was supposed to take that path. I came through it. I came through the fire. And as we all suffer so much in life, and I think of the pain and the unbearable tears and loss and suffering and fear and worry and prejudice that's put on us all in our own ways, and we manage to survive it. And not only survive it, but thrive. When I think about that, painting the 3 falls, that was very challenging because initially they were daunting. How am I going to paint them? I'll paint them all differently. They have to be radically different. They have to express that he fell once, twice, 3 times. Well, no, that's not the point. The point is we all fall. That's why there's so many falls in the stations. We fall down, we fall down, we fall down again, but it's not about the fall, it's about the rising up. And here he is, Jesus, on this path. He could have just laid down in the dirt and said, kill me here. But he didn't. He accepted that path with dignity, like my mother did at the end of her life, when there was no room in a hospital or hospice, and we had to tie her head up to the chair because her cancer had so depleted her, she couldn't do anything more than that. She suffered so terribly. And yet, the last thing she said to me was, I love you. And there's Jesus, standing up again, picking up this cross, and continuing. That is the message to me that I get from it. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. There are other crosses now. And the cross. There's the cross in those stations. And what is it? How did I handle it? To me, it's just a piece of black wood. Because my cross isn't that piece of black wood, it's many other things. But I wasn't going to give the power to that cross. The power is with that man, Jesus, going through what he has to. So there's a black upright form or a horizontal form, and he struggles to deal with it. But it's not about that cross for me. It's about how he moved through that journey. That's the message. That's the message. And when I got to the end, when he's laid in the tomb, I think my own peace about getting to that point of acceptance shows in that painting. To me, there is, I can take a deep breath. That's it. That's the journey. And the people who posed for me are a magnificent biological mother and son. And I always try to have a mother and her child, because it's the love between them that I'm painting. The fact that the son looks like her in some of the paintings and not so much in others, that's just a product of being blended. He looks a little bit like his father in one image, a little more like his mother in the other. And that's, in the practical sense, joyful and interesting for an artist to work with. But it wasn't easy for them. They worked very hard. They suffered too through it. They trusted me, and I had a sense of protection for them. You know, people who aren't professional models, they're vulnerable and they need protection. And the journey of painting them and asking them to do these things, it's an unknown, and it's intimate, instantly intimate, because no matter how you explain that you want somebody to move, words aren't enough. You have to touch them, you have to move them, you have to get very close with them and ask them to do it a little more extreme. And to ask a mother to hold her son as though he has just been crucified, when this young man is coming into his own as a young man, there were a lot of tears in doing this work. But the happier side of the work is that I I wanted this particular young man because he's got bountiful joy. He's masculine and he's discovering himself. He's a brilliant musician, has been a fabulous guitarist, been writing music since he was 10 years old. Clayton Robinson, he's just a beautiful soul. Everything I asked for, he said, yes, yes. Clayton, I'm going to now crucify you, and I need you to show me tremendous suffering. Okay, I can do it. Okay, more. Show me your teeth. Okay, hold it. Work, draw. Take a break. And we did this, and we did it, and they joined me on this path. So much like my journey with Jesus of the people, the work has received mixed responses. Sometimes people are too delicate to ask me, what race are they? And now sometimes, well, now really people know that my interest is including people of all races and ages and into my work, because I believe we were all created equally and beautifully in God's likeness. And before I close, I just want to tell you about one incredible person that I knew in my life, and her name was Sally Goodrich, and she lived in Bennington, Vermont. Her husband still does. And on 9/11, Sally and her husband lost their son, Pete. He was in the second plane to hit the Twin Towers. He was on his way to LA to a software conference. And Sally told me that their lives could have fallen apart at the pain they suffered so brutally, but they didn't. Sally and Don pulled together and formed the Peter Goodrich Foundation, and they went to Afghanistan, and they built a school for girls where the Taliban had trained. And Sally grew to love the people of Afghanistan. And she asked Don, when she knew she was dying, if he could take some of her ashes to Afghanistan, and he did. So part of Sally is in Afghanistan. And I asked her to write for my book about the painting of mine that they own, which is homage to 9/11. And she did, and you just would have loved her. Passionate, joyful, Irish, big Irish smile, beautiful, beautiful soul in every way, and so good to me. And she said, yes, but I have chemo brain. And I said, that doesn't matter to me, you just write whatever comes from your heart. And so the editor, Sue, put Sally's reflection in my first book, Holiness and the Feminine Spirit, The Art of Janet McKenzie, as the last reflection in the book, because it ends on hope. And that's the thread that I have felt so profoundly yesterday at St. Paul, today with all of you, with the stations there, with returning home here to Wisdom House. And so I will read that very last short quote that Sally wanted included at the end of the book and the end of her reflection. And it was written by Vaclav Havel, and this is it. The kind of hope I often think about, I understand above all as a state of mind, not a state of the world. Either we have hope within us or we don't. It's a dimension of the soul, and it's not essentially dependent on some particular observation of the world or estimate of the situation. It is an orientation of the spirit, an orientation of the heart. It transcends the world that is immediately experienced, and it is anchored somewhere beyond its horizons. Hope is definitely not the same thing as optimism. It is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out. It is this hope, above all, which gives strength to live and continually try new things. And I guess that's about the most that we all can do. So, thank you very much.